Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well and I hope you're getting along well with your work and with the module in general. And so previous weeks we introduced social networking. What we also done, we have looked at different areas that you need to be aware of when building an online presence. We also then moved into the ideas of building a strategic plan for your organization when using your social networks. Then we looked at the metrics. Of course, the reason why we've done that is because if you don't measure, you don't know where you're going. So it's absolutely essential to understand that. Then later on, we looked at the ideas of actually building up a campaign for your brand using social networks. Now, for the last lecture, what we thought we would cover is to actually look into the challenges of social networks. Now, that's the thing that we picked up from time to time, but I thought that it would be appropriate to actually cover a session on its own, talking about the challenges that social networking bring. Now, this is all very normal because with every technology that comes in, there are always challenges that come with it. And therefore, you're never going to have a situation whereby you're going to have a perfect technology that does absolutely everything without a risk whatsoever. So new technologies bring risk. So what we're going to do in this session, we're going to talk about drawbacks and challenges that social networking bring to the businesses. Now, some of the things that I want to talk to you about are normally one of the most talked about things, which is privacy and security, credibility of social networks, updates on the content, and all the rest. Control, having a bit of a control over social channels. Time, of course, time is money. So, when you end up spending lots of time on social networks, that means that you're going to have people to look after those presences, and that just means hiring people, and obviously time they spend is the time that you've got to pay them. The next one is monitoring. Now, of course, monitoring is going to be essential, not just to know how well you're doing with the business online, but actually to see which are the areas that you can improve. Now remember, we've said to do this, you've got to have tools in place to be able to see these specific solutions and improvements that you can make with your brands. And then, last but not least, takeaways, and what are the key things that I want you to take with you as we're finishing the module. And please know that this is our last session, and we're finishing with the module. We're finishing with everything we've done so far, and of course, you'll be finishing it by submitting your work. But then we've got to do the rest, which is going to be about marking, and therefore there'll be very little or no holiday whatsoever. But that's just the way it is. Now let's get on into it. Now when it comes to privacy, okay, there are several groups that I'd like to talk to you about when it comes to privacy in social networks. Well, these are according to research the most popular ones, but also according to the industry as well. Now, cyber stalking and location disclosure. Now this is something that, of course, for those people who want to do bad things, and of course they know exactly where are you thanks to your check-in details on Facebook and things like that, and therefore these are called cyber stalking, and people actually checking and picking time when you're not at home, and then obviously come and do something not good for your place where you live, or picking an eye on that. So it's something to be aware of, and it's probably something to also keep in mind whenever you travel and you do things like that. So even though social is about being open, there should be a limit to it. You should always be aware of how much you're sharing. You should always be aware of how much you share with the public, because when it's out there, it's out there, and unfortunately in the world we live in, there are people that want to do bad things to us. The next group is social profile and third-party disclosure. Now this is very popular because maybe you forgot about this, but there's so many services online that you subscribe to do just one thing, and that is to subscribe using your Twitter or Facebook profile, and therefore making it so easy for them to get hands on all the data that you've got on your Facebook, including your location, address, email, and everything else. So in other words, they will pretty much get everything that you have on Facebook, and therefore this is what we call third-party disclosure. And it's something to be aware of, and it's something that lots of people take for granted, but it's quite important to keep in your consideration whenever you work on it. Now, the other thing, of course, is that sometimes I actually tend to find quite useful to create new accounts for new services online instead of signing up with my Facebook or Twitter account. The next one is invasive privacy, of course, agreements and Facebook ads. Now, this is still, a gray area, because Facebook is obviously trying their best to try and make as much money as they can using advertising, which is one of their most, useful kind of platform for them to bring revenues to the company. However, sometimes they will be getting into our own private space to actually use our names and use our profiles to be able to sell ads on Facebook. Now, that is something that they're working on it. The research shows that until now they haven't got it entirely right. We all know it. But of course, it's something that comes with the new technologies, and I think that it'll take a bit more time for them to actually get it right. And we covered in one of the lectures the idea about actually serving appropriate ads for the appropriate profiles. And some of the ads that Facebook, for instance, serves me, they're actually not appropriate ads. Not appropriate in a sense that they are not ads tailored to me and to my needs based on my profile. And we've covered this in the last few weeks. Spookio, of course, is a people-related search engine that results in a compiled kind of pieces of information through data aggregation, and therefore this is also something to be aware of, and that happens a lot on the web. Unreliable information. Now, this is also that happens as a result of people creating profiles and not wanting to share their real data, the real information about themselves. And 49% of people have heard false news on the web, of course, because people tend to share things that are not real. And so you can also look at false rumors, like the one in Mexico suburb spread, which spread via Twitter and Facebook, caused panic, flooded to the local police with over 3,000 phone calls, and temporarily closed schools. So only one tweet and one piece of content has actually disturbed the entire city, and that was last year. So in other words, the information sometimes you find on the web, especially on social networks, is not necessarily all the time credible piece of work. So you've got to do a bit of work to kind of test it and understand what is the best for you, what is the best for what you're trying to do. Fraud apps asking for personal info and prior after installing. So in other words, there are also lots of applications within social networking platforms, because these platforms are open for other third-party developers to build applications that actually enable them to ask for further details, and sometimes credit card details or payments or addresses and things like that, which is done via these third-party applications. Now, law enforcement on the use of social networking for ads. This is being looked after. I think US is probably closer to having something put together that will kind of set the rules and set the criteria, set the guidelines for social networking to use for ads. I think in Europe it's something that is being looked after, but we still don't know where they are in terms of the government regulating this huge kind of industry. Online versus offline. Well, this is one of the biggest things in here, is the fact that when we spend so much time online, we kind of tend to forget that obviously when we are together with friends and face to face, we need to engage with them rather than engage with our phones, and that's what we do most of the times. We're with friends and suddenly we're on our phones, and it's like there's no way of getting rid of it. So sometimes when I actually meet with friends, we tend to leave phones aside and then just not touch them until we've had our dinner and we had our food or whatever we wanted to have. So also the research shows that is impacting a little bit the face-to-face engagement, especially with the role of social networks, so that we want to see what people have said around us and what they are talking about with the content we've published. Now, around that 92% of people worried about identity theft. Now, this is something that it is a bit of a worry, because obviously when you're out there, people can just copy things and know more about you and who you are and what you do. So a bit of balance to how much you share is always essential, but it's also going to be important for the companies and for the brands as well. So there needs to be a bit of balance. There needs to be a middle line somewhere where you're going to say, I'm not going to share more than this, and this is fine, and this is it. It'll do the job for us. Around 26.7% of people only allow certain employees to access social networking sites. There's still huge amounts of challenges when it comes to social networks. There are lots of companies that still do not believe that there is an opportunity with social networks and there is something that they could do, and therefore there's only 25% pretty much are businesses who kind of look into the ideas of trying to do something about it, but most of the time they kind of block these sites to being used at all. And I think what this needs to happen is there needs to be a bit of a plan, a bit of a guide of what are the criteria and what are the criteria for use on social networks within a company. So instead of actually cutting it down, it will be much better to have something in place that regulates in a way the process rather than having everything stopped down for everyone to use. So ultimately it's still something that needs to be looked after. It's still something that companies need to do, but and it is a bit of a challenge. Now let's look at social profiling, third-party disclosure. Now I wanted to bring this screenshot for you because just to show you of how much of information every time you sign in using your Facebook with any other third-party service you'll share with that company. So that what that means is that automatically they get hands on all this information from you that you have built up on Facebook over time. And it is something that most of the time lots of e-commerce websites don't even have all of this information that is here, and that's why Facebook is powerful, because of the information that it has in their service. And of course information is beautiful, information is useful for the companies and everything else in terms of driving business, driving also tailored ads toward the profile of the customers. Now, what are some of the examples? Let's look at some of them of the most popular examples when it comes to the use of Twitter that ended up becoming a disaster. Well, Michael Arrington, owner of enormously popular blog called TechCrunch, was getting bad service from the ISP Comcast, and he said, okay, well, tearing into Comcast on Twitter. So he posted that, and then problem is that he has pretty much 12,000 followers. Imagine if he had like 1.2 million followers, and then that obviously would affect even wider the company. Now 20 minutes later, Michael got a call from Comcast executive who wanted to help, obviously knowing that he's quite influential online. Comcast was monitoring Twitter, and obviously this is when they use their tools to reach out and resolve the issue before it became a big PR disaster and could have turned into a big cause or praise for the company. So in other words, this PR disaster was mainly stopped because the company is prepared, it's got a platform, it's got a way to use tools to understand and pick up when people talk about their brand. Let's look at another example. Now this is quite popular because it as it goes, GoDaddy CEO kills elephant, and although GoDaddy is accustomed to controversial marketing tactics, this incident actually pretty much affects them and they lose customers from it. And if you don't know what a GoDaddy is the biggest and the largest website online to buy, platform online to buy and sell domain names. CEO Bob Parsons took a video of himself on a hunt in Africa, and then obviously he proudly tweeted the fact that he's killed a problematic elephant. And of course NGOs like PETA responded swiftly regarding this customer shift to the new domain, asking the customers to actually shift from the GoDaddy to another domain name all across Twitter. Now competitors of GoDaddy did another thing, because that was an opportunity for them to win on some of their GoDaddy customers, and they said, okay, well, we are donating £1 to elephant funds and property rate, and reportedly raised around $20,000. Now that's immediately, you can see all the war that goes online to win these customers. That is because as soon as you made that mistake, as soon as you misstepped the boat, somebody else will come in, will take the customers, of course, we'll move on with it. Now it is rare, but this incident receives a stronger category rating as actual revenues were directly impacted. So in other words, this has had an impact on GoDaddy. And of course, why was that? Simply because now being a social, we've got to be a bit careful what we say, what we talk about, what we share, because being social, being open, that doesn't mean that you could just say anything. You've got to have a bit of a plan of the content that you publish. Negative doesn't mean a scary threat. No, if when brands receive negative messages, that doesn't mean that that's a scary or that's a threat. That just means that probably businesses haven't delivered. Now, what you could do, you can get back to that negative inquiry and then talk to the customers and find ways to fix it. Or the other thing that could be done, instead of actually talking that online, we've said we could do that one thing to actually bring it offline, and then either via email or via the phone, sort it out instead of leaving it out for too long. Because if you leave it too long, a negative response or a negative comment can actually become something that will impact your brand online. But in general, normally negative doesn't necessarily mean a scary or threat to the company. An example that I want to show you of the power that social media has had, and the biggest event last year was the Felix Jump Red Bull Stratos, which was one of the biggest successes when it comes to social. And I thought I'll bring that one for the last session, just so you can get an idea about what the impact that had on the company and how was that looked from the social media perspective.
We'll start removing here in a little bit. Let's get it a little bit. Release.
If you're scared, walk away, 'cause there's no need to feel ashamed. Yeah, we all feel the same. Where's your passion? Where's your fighting?
Alright, now, the whole world is looking on. I'm going over. Far away. States in the 25. Showing Felix at a stable descent.
Okay, now that was one of the most amazing things that was organized, obviously, and funded and supported by Red Bull. And you couldn't think of any better way of doing it, and obviously covering it with social, because it was all around covering everything, trending on Twitter, trending on Facebook, and everywhere you could think of. Now let's look at some examples now. In Twitter alone, if we look at some stats now, you'll start to get an idea about what was actually happening when it came to the stats. Okay, now in Twitter alone, that account reached out to 2 million, almost up to 3 million accounts reached out with this piece of content. Now, of course, that then also reached out to over 3 million of impressions. And then when you look at the tweets, and then how many tweets were going on during that time, and also looking at different times of the day, you'll just see that that was a full coverage across social networks of the live jump with a hashtag, pretty much covering everything, that every possible channel you could think of, and obviously Twitter being the main platform to do just that. And that was an amazing thing, because when you see about the amount of tweets and how much this has had an influence on the entire project, if you took off the social media, probably wouldn't have been as exciting as you would have thought, because all you would have of all of that jump would have just been the 2 minutes video covered by the BBC or one of the local one of the channels, and that would be it. But thanks to the social, everyone in the world had a chance to see what people were talking about and actually follow it live using Twitter and YouTube as well. Now let's look at more stats. Of course, Red Bull fans reached reached out an incredibly amount of over 32 million fans. So in other words, that was incredible, and you can just see that just before the jump, how fast that's grown. So it had an enormous and a great success for the company. When you look at YouTube, of course, you'll also see how much that has impacted views on Red Bull uploaded content, and you can see that went straight away from 325 million to over 375 million in a short period of time, in less than a week, and that's extraordinary. And then, of course, as I said earlier, that could have been something really, really dangerous for the company. That it could have been a red splash. Now, it's great that he's had the great jump and great success with it and everything, but that could have it could have pretty much destroyed the company. One of the most successful companies and the most powerful brands in the world could have been affected if, for instance, Felix wouldn't have survived. That could have been a big red splash, and fortunately that didn't happen. That's great, but again, you can just see how much companies pushing forward to do just that, knowing that all the help and all the support company will be getting thanks to the social. So they married perfect piece of content with perfect social channels, and then you've got a perfect result. And I thought that was quite an amazing thing that done last year, and I thought I'll cover that in our last session. Now let's look at some of the stats before we reach the end of this session. Of course, Brazilians have the highest number of the online friends of any country, averaging 481 friends per user, while the Japanese average only 29 friends. Social networks and blogs in the US reach nearly 80% of active US users, and I thought I'll share some of these stats just to keep you in the loop of the digital and what we covered this semester. 90% of marketers now use social networks in their marketing efforts. In other words, more and more now social media is becoming the heart of what we do with engaging with customers, publishing content, and also increasing our revenues. Half of all social media users are between 25 and 45, and by the way, the 45 range is actually improving now. There are lots more users above 45 years old actually joining social. 90% of companies with 100 or more employees use social media in their marketing mix. In other words, again, as you can see now, social media is not just a standalone thing, but is actually brought in for the companies to make a change and make a difference. 5 leading social networking websites, as we know: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, and Pinterest. But of course, now with new emerging platforms like Vine, Instagram is having a great success as well. But there'll be a bit more now. How far this is going to go and how much this is going to continue being this way? I think without talking too much about the research and what the research is showing, the very simple idea that this is giving a power to consumers is driven by users rather than driven by companies. I could see this going for a long time, because I have a few students asking, do you see Facebook still being a powerful platform? Do you see Twitter still going on, and so on and so forth? So I think the reason why these sites can actually have a great success and actually keep growing and keep going forward until we have new services come along is simply because they are driven by users, driven by us, and it's so we want to have that power, we want to have that opportunity to be able to do that ourselves. And I think that's why these platforms are having a great success. So it's not necessarily about the services they're providing, it's not necessarily about all the technology of innovation. It's partly because of that, but it's not 100%. It's because people are driving it. 71% of consumers say that SEO participating in social media leads to improved brand image. So lots of consumers now do want to see CEOs tweeting, do want to see CEOs engaging with a social networking presence for the company, because it does give them a feel that actually everyone in the company from the top to the bottom is engaged with it. 92% of recruiters use social media to find new candidates, up from 82 in 2010. So you can see now we're reaching out to 100% of recruiters actually recruiting mainly based on social networks. Now that is a huge change. That is a huge shift from the way we've done this process in the past, and therefore that immediately gives us a big question of something for us to think about whenever we want to move to the next career or do something else. In other words, we need to know what is our presence on social space, what are our personal brand that we talked about a few weeks ago. In other words, how do people define us when they see us on the web? And of course, that goes same with the businesses. How do people define your business social space? Because mainly that could be the reason that consumers will want to spend time with you online or not. Now, a few other things. Want to get retweeted more often? Research shows the keyword which gets most increased retweets and tweets and likelihood of having a lot more success include please, thank you, Twitter, social media, and new. Words to avoid include LOL, okay, gonna, hey, tired, work, and bored. That's pretty much what the research shows. So, you know, as you can see, please and thank you are the very powerful words, and also the words that we need to be using more often, because that just gives us an opportunity to reach out to more people. Now, quick module summary. We looked at introduction to social networks, understanding social networks, social trends, build social presence, social networking strategy. We looked at metrics, and I identify what matters for the company to measure. And we've talked about several ways of making sure that we're measuring things that are essential for the business, and also using tools to do that. Customer support using social networks. Now we know that more and more social media is playing an important role and an amazing role to actually provide customer support for the companies using social networks. In other words, the reason why we talked about customer support later in the module, simply because you need to build up on it, either as a student or as a company, before you're able to provide a decent customer support online. So there are several steps beforehand you've got to do to be able to give a proper, decent customer service on Twitter. And that means having a good presence, having a good branding, but also having a good tools and metrics to measure consistently, and to engage with people online, understand what they're talking about, to get to the point where you have a strategy, you have a plan, and then you're able to provide a customer support. Then after that, we talked about the power last week, the power of innovating using social networking channels. Now, the amount of information that normally we receive using social networking channels is extraordinary, and all of that piece of information is what I call gold mine for businesses, for researchers, for everyone you can think of in the web, because that can give us an opportunity to work out, crunch those numbers, and build up ideas and things that are going to be useful to us. And in other words, something that really is changing the way we build business models, the way we build services, thanks to that piece of information. And then, of course, after that is about creating as much as you can. But of course, part of your projects, those of you who are students in here watching this video, is about creating a YouTube video, which you're going to tell us about social networking campaign for your business. Now, that's overall. And the last bit that we wanted to talk about is the drawbacks or challenges that we call of social networking sites. Now, please know that this is an important element to think about. Now, what are the takeaways for this course? What are the things that I want you to take away? Those of you who are students, and obviously you see me every week, and those of you who probably follow me online or watch some of our lectures that we publish on iTunes U or on YouTube, these are some of the things I want to share with you. Social space is much more complicated than it looks like, and you know, there's so many elements and things to think about. So it's not just creating a profile and that says sit back and relax. Mobile is essential tools for social space. So every time you're building up a social presence, you've got to keep in mind that mobile is driving everything, and mobile is driving the business, and mobile is driving those conversations as well. Twitter endorsements and guidelines could be done through paid and ad. Now, when you've got somebody endorsing your products or services using Twitter, it's actually much better to have a clear fact that is someone endorsing your brand, rather than just hiding it from the customer. Avoiding posting confidential information. Now, it is really important that sometimes we take for granted, but being able to step back and think twice before you publish is always a good idea. So think twice and then publish once. It's probably something that you could use in the near future. The biggest danger is not being on social networks. So by deciding not to be there, whether you're personal or you're an individual or a brand, they're actually not stopping you from saving yourself from the world, but actually stopping you from an opportunity to understand what's happening out there. Now, specifically if you're a brand, but if you're not there actually is a lot riskier because you're missing out the opportunity. Every company must have a plan for monitoring social media and rapid response. So in other words, what we've covered in the course is what the companies need to do to actually be able to do well on social. So it's not like one shot creating profiles and just doing a bit of engagement, that's it. There needs to be a systematic way of going through different processes, as we cover some of them in the course, to be able to build a presence, a decent presence for your brand, to do lots of things, to provide customer support, try to improve service and products, innovate, change, but also build up your brand further. Define and use relevant metrics for your research on, taking return on investments when it comes to your business. Now, of course, as I said to you, there'll be so many things that you can check and track using social networking tools, but remember there are lots of things that are not necessarily something that bring the company money straight away in the profits, but actually in the long run they help companies build up a stronger brand. They help companies build up a brand that just changes the way customers perceive you. So in other words, it helps you to build up a brand, to focus on something that is pretty much helping you to build a business that matters, and the business that one day, if you were not around, you would be missed. Now, that was pretty much it, and thank you for choosing to study Social Network and Enterprise module. Those of you online, thank you for stopping by and watching this video, or watching previous lectures as well. I hope we've been able to help some of you in understanding this social space, this social world, and I hope that we've also helped some of our students that might be interested to work in this area when they graduate and finish their universities next year, and they'll be in different graduate schemes. So thank you very much for everything. On behalf of Richard, Dave, and Steve as well, we wish you all the best. You'll be finishing the work now, and you don't have to worry about anything, but then we'll have to do all of the marking. So there's no holiday pretty much for us. There'll be very little if there is any. So thank you very much indeed, and we wish you all the best. Bye bye.